So we're going to do that in Matthew chapter 14, a little prelude. This is, again, one of my favorite passages. I don't want to belabor it because I always do. But this is essentially one of the boat trips that the disciples have. And the reason it's fascinating to me is because of the humanity. And if you read John 6 and you read Mark 6 and you combine it with Matthew chapter 14, you get this really huge picture of humanity, the humanity of the disciples. So really quickly, what happens? The disciples come back. They've been in 2-by-2 ministry with Jesus. He sent them out for 2 weeks. So they've been on a missions trip, basically, for 2 weeks. They would go in 2-by-2 all through Galilee and the Galilean area, right? And you might recall that because he gives them instructions and he says, hey, make sure you take a money bag and make sure that you, when you go to someone's house, if they don't have peace with you, it's fine. Just leave and find a house that is at peace with you. And he gives them some dialogue and some instructions on how to outreach. And they're just there to heal, to cast out demons, and to tell people the good news of the kingdom. That's what their whole mission is. So they do that for 2 weeks. And after 2 weeks, they come back to Jesus. They report to him, hey, this is what's been going on. It's been incredible. All these great things are happening. And God was working and yada, yada. Not yada, yada about God working, yada, yada. They had more to say. So, that's what they go on with. So Jesus says, okay, you know what? Here's what we're going to do. We're going to go and we're going to go away alone. We're going to go away and we're going to spend some time alone so that you can rest from what you've been involved with. So the disciples are like, we like this plan. We're into this plan. They get into a boat and they sail across the Lake of Gennesaret. And meanwhile, while they're sailing across, there's a group of people, thousands of people, that see Jesus get in the boat and leave. And they're like, oh, no, you didn't. And so they actually circumvent the lake while they're sailing and somehow get there at the same time or right around the same time. So Jesus and the disciples, they get off the boat, and they're like, ta-da, here's 5,000 men. And because it's the feeding of the 5,000, right? But even when you read the account from Mark and John, they know it's not just 5,000 dudes, it's 5,000 dudes and women and children. So really you're talking about probably a 12, 13, 14,000 person event. Right? So it's significantly larger. Not that I don't think that makes it more miraculous. I mean, 5 loaves and 2 fishes with 5,000. I mean, what's 7,000 more, I guess, at that point. Right? It's like when you're going to pay the credit card off and you're like, I could pay an extra $20, but oh my, right? So what happens is the disciples who hadn't gotten time were told to eat the whole day previous to that. They're on the boat. They're going to a deserted place where they're supposed to be alone. They get off the boat. It's not a deserted place. They still haven't eaten yet after returning from their missions trip that morning. And now there's these people. And so Jesus looks at the people and it says he had compassion on them because they were like sheep with no shepherd. So he begins to teach the people and they're sitting there and it says, it gives us timelines. So they arrive there late morning. He teaches the people until late afternoon, right? We have no reading that it doesn't tell us whether or not the disciples have eaten yet. But what we do know is in the late afternoon, they go to Jesus and they say, this is a deserted place. There's no McDonald's around here. There's no Safeway. We need you to send these people away so that they can go get something to eat, right? And Jesus says, no, I'm not going to send them away. You give them something to eat. And so that's when Andrew pulls that little boy up and says, well, this guy has a lunch and it's 5 loaves and 2 fishes, but what is that among so many? Which I think is, I don't want to get sidetracked, but I think that's interesting. I think Andrew's maybe on the trail that maybe God could do a miracle through Jesus. I don't know why else you bring some stupid little lunch up there to be like, hey, have you thought about this? But that's what he does. And so Jesus says, sure, sounds good. And he lifts up, he breaks the loaves, he gives thanks for them, and then he puts that 5 loaves and 2 fishes into 12 baskets in front of the disciples, right? And so the disciples take the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and they serve. They have everybody sit down by 50s, right? So you have these big squares of 50 people. I don't know how that works out for 13,000 people, but they work it all out, right? And again, 13,000 is a assumption. We don't know. We know that it was 5,000 men plus women and children. So it seems like that would be a good number. So he goes out and they feed them all. And it went from late afternoon until into the evening. So that would be hard, I think. Because you've been witnessing and outreaching and serving the Lord for 12 weeks straight, staying in foreign houses with foreign people. You've been rejected by people. You've dusted off the sandals and pronounced, that they're not going to go with you. You're not going to take their guilt and shame with you. All these things have happened in your life. You've cast out demons, good ministry that tuckers you out, and bad ministry that's emotional taxing. And they go through all that. They jump off this boat after told they're going to get a vacation, basically, some time alone. There's thousands and thousands and thousands of people there. They sort of like, finally get rid of these people, Jesus. And Jesus says, no, you feed them instead. So they feeds them. They feed them for hours. Right? So then the evening comes, and that's what we're going to pick up. We're picking up in the evening after they fed the people. So in Matthew chapter 14 and verse 22, it says, immediately Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowd. After he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountain by himself to pray. Later that night, he was there alone. And the boat was already a considerable distance from the land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. And when the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. It's a ghost, they said, and they cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, take courage, it is I, don't be afraid. Lord, if it is you, Peter replied, tell me to come to you on the water. Come, he said. Then Peter got down out of the boat and walked on the water and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, cried out, Lord, save me. Immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and caught him. You of little faith, he said, why did you doubt? And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down, and then those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, truly, you are the Son of God. When they had crossed over, they landed at Gennesaret, and when the men of that place recognized Jesus, they sent word to all the surrounding country. People brought all their sick to him and begged him to let the sick just touch the edge of his cloak, and all who touched it were healed. Now, we know from Mark in his gospel, in Mark chapter 6, and I think this is what we talked about last week, so I want to be brief with it. We know the heart condition of the disciples because Mark tells us, I think it's in verse 48 or 49, right around there, Mark tells us that when Jesus gets into the boat, that the wind dies down and they worship him, and he includes something that's really important for our lives. And this sounds melodramatic, but it really is. It says that they worshiped him because they observed that he calmed the wind and the waves, but it says that they gained no insight from the miracle of the loaves. That's just something I've always carried with me, not because I'm awesome, but because I'm scared to death that I'm that kind of person. The fact that I'm low blood sugar, I was promised a vacation I didn't get. I was told, I had a great suggestion for Jesus of how him to handle ministry, and he rejected it and made me do it instead. Right? And then it took hours to do it, and then I got commanded to get into a boat. I rowed against the wind for about 8 or 9 hours. It says this translation says about dawn. The literal translation is the fourth watch of the night, which is between 3 to 6 a.m. So just think of your timeline. You've come back from a mission trip. It's the morning. Jesus says, let's go somewhere to be alone and rest. You say, good call. You sail across. All these people run or like jog or whatever in a desert. You're like, what are you guys, nuts? And they come and they meet Jesus. All right, so it's been that time in the morning. You haven't eaten yet. You get out of the boat. You have to watch Jesus minister to these people that you're not even happy about being there. Then you tell him, send them away. He doesn't send them away. He says, you feed them instead. You feed them. It's evening. Jesus says, now go get in that boat. You're like, okay. You go get in the boat. He says, go to the other side of the lake. You say, okay, I'll go to the other side of the lake. You row for 8 to 9 hours. It's evening. Now it's almost dawn. You've probably eaten one time while you were handing out all that food to other people. And then you see a ghost, what you think is a ghost. And that whole time, your heart is hardened. That's wild. So the fact that a person could sit there for hours, and I mean, just the fact that you could see Jesus take 5 loaves and 2 fishes, these are not like giant, swordfish. These are like little Lake Gennesaret fish. The fact that you could see him divide those up into 12 separate baskets, and then you could hand all that food out, literally be the perpetrator of the miracle, the one who's carrying it out, who's doing the will of God. This is all in the middle of the will of God. And still go through that and not realize anything new or incredible about Jesus. That's what it means. That's just unthinkable to me. It scares the daylights out of me, to be honest. Because I could absolutely do that, and I'm sure I have. I have no doubt that I have missed out on God revealing himself in my life because I was upset about what he was doing in my life. Does that make sense? And so in this story we see human beings trying to work through disappointment, anger, toil, hard work, all those things, and how they fear, and how God calls them to work through those things because it's opportunity. Here's the thing about God's work, and you guys probably already know this. You and I get to decide how involved we are in what God has for us. We do. You decide how holy you are. God decided how righteous you would be because he made you right with him, right? We know that righteousness comes by faith. In other words, my right standing with God has nothing to do with me or my sin or anything because Christ took care of it at Calvary. That's the miracle of the gospel. The fact that Christ died for sin, that he paid the debt that we owe, right? He paid that debt eternally with his blood. And when we trusted in him, we were given that righteousness. That's one of the reasons 2 Corinthians is such a great letter. In 2 Corinthians 5, Paul again lays out this reality that he became sin, both allegorically and literally, that Christ took sin in himself, that he bore it in himself on the tree, all sin of humanity, and that his Father judged him for every single sin and our own very nature for all eternity in Christ. He took all the judgment that every human on the planet is due. And then he perishes, he dies, he gives up the ghost, however you'd like to label it, and he rises again from the dead, and he declared his victory over sin. The resurrection showed not only did he wasn't martyred because we're lame. He died, judged by his Father, and rose again victorious because he never deserved it. And then he goes on to tell us about the gospel that anybody who calls upon the name of the Lord, anyone who says, I need that forgiveness, he says it's a gift. It's the gift of God. It's given to you. Forgiveness is a gift. Righteousness is a gift. Holiness, being set aside for God, we get to decide that. And so this is just a kind of a honing in on one example in these lives of where they didn't choose holiness. They chose hard-heartedness, and it cost them. Did it cost them eternally? I don't know how that works. And not to say I think that they went to hell or something, but it cost them in the moment. It cost them knowing Jesus. It cost their peace. It cost their confidence. It cost them an entire night of being angry, an entire night of doubting. It cost them misery.